Hello, everybody. Gbenga Olatunji here, welcoming you to GJAMES Associates channel. Loss relief is what we want to look at in taxation today. The purpose, the types, the rules that are governing loss relief. So why do we have loss relief granted? That is the purpose question we want to answer. The types of loss reliefs and how to go about their administration, and the rules we must be guided with for us to enjoy loss relief. Those are the things we'll be looking at right about now. Previously, and if it sounds interesting to you, you may look this up on the channel. Computation of PAYE tax has been dealt with under personal income tax. We've made a computation and calculation of it. So if it does interest you, you may look at the topic on the platform. Having said that, let us go into loss reliefs. After we had generated and had our audited financial statement, then the taxman will pick it up and compute and compile the allowable and the disallowable expenses. And after using the allowable and disallowable expenses, then we will come to a loss we can call loss for the purpose of taxation, because the financial loss does not necessarily mean that the organization will run into loss, especially when it comes to taxation. So we should not take anything about accounting loss or taxation loss for granted or to be the same. They are not the same thing. So by way of introducing ourselves to loss release, we need to emphasize that they are different. So when a company makes a loss from its trade or business, when its allowable operating expenses actually exceeds the total revenue made. So in arriving at the chargeable profit of a company, or loss as the case may be, brought forward from the preceding year of assessment are to be deducted. So especially if there is a loss in the preceding year, we need to relieve it out of the profits for the year of assessment currently being looked at before we can conclude. So the carry forward loss relief is available to a corporate taxpayer, and we need to emphasize that too, that for non-corporate, for individual taxpayer, carry forward loss relief, because for individual taxpayers there are restrictions for them. They need to make an application, and they could only relieve it from that source of income, unlike the corporate organization in which they can actually carry it forward, and beginning from 2007 actually they can actually carry it forward indefinitely. Having said that, and what are the purposes of loss relief granted to an organization or even to any taxpayer, or for that matter? First of all, to know the characteristics of relevant loss relief procedure. Having said that, there are rules, there are regulations that we need to understand. So it's good that we familiarize ourselves with the character of loss release and the procedures for loss release, and that is one of the reason and the purpose of studying loss release. Then to know the treatment of losses during commencement of business, and there is a caveat on this. There's an exception to the rule when we are talking about knowing the treatment of losses during commencement of business. Don't forget now that New Finance Act has taken effect, and because of that, New Finance Act has jettisoned the commencement rule about from the date of the beginning of operation of business to the 1st December. That has been removed. Everything now is from the beginning to December, and that made easy computation and has helped in removing everything about double taxation and the overlapping of the basis period. All these and many more we've actually studied under that previous tax lectures that we've delivered. You can look them up. So now by the time we go into computation, we'll see that our losses now will be only utilized, not partially like before, because of that overlapping issue that we have concerning commencement rule. That has been taken away thanks to New Finance Act. Last but not the least, among the purposes that we are going to discuss is to know how to treat losses when there is an overlapping of basis period, and now there is no longer overlapping of the basis period thanks to Finance Act. Rules guiding loss relief. Rules are important to be understood, and one of the critical rules in loss relief is that in no circumstance shall the amount to be relieved exceed the total amount of loss incurred. I want to believe we understand that, because that actually will amount to gaining on our losses. And even in an insurance company, you cannot gain on losses. You can only enjoy and be brought back to normalcy, not that you will now gain or will now gain on the losses we've incurred. Is to be brought back to the normal position that we have. So likewise, there shall not be gain on the losses made, and that is what this rule actually is trying to capture. In no circumstance shall the amount to be relieved be more than the total amount of loss. I use this there because now we can carry forward indefinitely from 2007. Also, another rule that we need to understand and be at our fingertips is that relief can only be granted against the profits from the trade or business in which the loss was incurred. For example, you have so many businesses, let's say a conglomerate. A conglomerate, we have so many other organizations. So you cannot use the loss of A in ABC conglomerates and to relieve from the profits of B. A will bear its loss, B will bear its losses, C will bear its losses, and at the end of the day, they can now consolidate and aggregate as a conglomerate. But individually, they are going to be relieved against the profit from the trade or business in which the loss was incurred. Also, the amount of the loss to be allowed should be that which the relevant tax authority is satisfied with as having been incurred by the company in a trade or business. Let me come again slowly. The tax authority, especially Federal Inland Revenue Service, must be sure and ascertain and agree with the taxpayer, now the business, the entity, that having gone through their books, maybe a desk review, they agree that the organization actually made loss, not pretending to have made loss or cooked it up. No. So it is one of the conditions. So it therefore means that if the tax officials will not agree with the accounts presented to have had loss, or at the end of the day the assessable profit, the chargeable profit is not showing loss or losses, it is not going to be allowed. The organization is not going to enjoy loss relief. This is very important, and that is why as tax practitioners, as accountants, building relationship, especially when it comes to tax officers, are very important, and carrying the tax authority, relevant tax authority, along in our business is very important. Another rule governing loss relief is that beginning from 2007, like I've said, organizations can now carry forward indefinitely and be relieved against future profits, their losses incurred. Also, the loss available for relief should be computed on the same basis as that of the assessable profit for a year of assessment. So we don't come and change the rule arbitrarily, abruptly, so that we can enjoy loss relief. No, the way we've been computing, we must continue to use it. Consistency as part of our concepts must be abided by or with. It therefore means that we can't just change our basis period for taxation purposes anyhow. We must just abide by the rule and be consistent with it. In fact, there's no reason for changing it anymore, because everything now is from January to December by virtue of new finance act. So that is almost impossible now, because the simplicity that new finance act has brought into the game has actually eradicated that. Now let us move on to the types of loss reliefs that we could enjoy. The types of loss reliefs that we could enjoy. We have the current year loss reliefs, carry forward loss reliefs, and terminal loss reliefs. The terminal loss reliefs, carry forward loss release, current year loss release. So let us pick them one after the other. So when we're talking about current year loss release, as it suggests, this is one of the methods for relieving losses, and it is applicable only to individuals, not the corporate entity. It's available to sole proprietorship, individual businessman, businesswoman. So in this case, losses incurred from a particular source of income can only be relieved against and other incomes that the businessman has made. So in order to enjoy current year loss relief, there must be a written application, and this is one of the exceptions and the differences between the individual loss relief, which we can call current year loss relief, and the carry forward loss relief, which the body corporate will enjoy. So under current year loss release, the individual can enjoy loss release from other sources of income, in as much that all of them are associated with that individual businessman or businesswoman. Two, he or she must make application within the next 12 months after the end of that assessment year for loss relief. So it is important to note that the current year loss relief is applicable to a loss incurred only in the first year. Only in the first year of business operation, and any unrelieved loss can only be set of against the profits from the source from which the loss was incurred. For carrying forward loss release, there is no need to have a written application by the taxpayer to the relevant tax authority. It is automatically granted. Preceding year basis. Don't forget that the organizations are usually taxed on preceding basis. That is, the tax year, let's say for example, the tax year 2022 will be assessing the business profit or loss of 2021 and so on. So it's on preceding year basis. So the relief too will take cognizance of that. The loss of a source of income is relievable against future income earned from the same source of income. Don't forget, unlike the current year loss relief that's basically enjoyed by the individuals that can put their different sources together and make an application for loss reliefs. For carrying forward loss relief, the loss of a source or from a source of income is relievable against the future income earned from the same source of income. And last but not the least that we are going to talk about under carrying forward loss relief is that the loss of a source of income shall be available for relief against the future profit from the same source of income until it is fully relieved or it is fully utilized. I think that's why it's called carrying forward loss relief anyway. So let us move on to terminal loss relief. Terminal loss release. So if you are yet to subscribe or you are viewing us, joining us for the first time, please don't forget to subscribe, share, tell others to tell others about this channel, and click on notification. Share. So for terminal loss release, cessation must come to our mind. Cessation rule must come to our mind. Therefore, actual year basis is indispensable in this regards. So the computation of assessable income for the year of cessation, that is the terminal year, will be on actual year basis. So there is no provision in the acts for granting the relief for losses by a company in the year of assessment in which its trade or business permanently ceases. So thus, there is no relief for any loss incurred in the last year of trade, nor for any unrelieved loss or losses initially accumulated up to the date of cessation, because the organization is no longer in existence and the tax authority or the government knows that there is no profit again coming from the end of that organization. So we bring everything to an halt. So therefore, those losses accumulated could no longer be relieved, and the computation for terminal loss relief is going to be on actual year basis. So since a loss has been incurred for the period in which the organization ceases, assessment will be new, of course. For the assessment year concerned, the assessment is going to be new. However, there are provisions for the relief of unutilized capital allowance. Don't forget, capital allowance is associated with the assets we newly procure and depreciation. I hope we will remember that disallowable, allowable. So capital allowance is granted in lieu or in replacement of depreciation. So, however, there are provisions for the relief of unutilized capital allowance at the end of a permanent cessation of a company or a trade. So such a capital allowance can be carried back to be relieved against the assessable profit of the preceding year and such release can go back to the past 5 years to be relieved rather. And I want to believe that this clause is to as much as possible, because the organization is ceasing and there may be need to pay creditor and the like. The government is trying to do its own bit of part to ensure that liabilities as much as possible is reduced and relieved, and creditors are encouraged to have more in the dissolution of the organization. So therefore, this is being granted and unutilized capital allowance is being used, and we can relieve it even to the extent of the previous 5 years unutilized capital allowance. So in computing capital allowance now is simpler than before, because there is no commencement rule, especially for organizations that are just starting, that is difficult like before. It's no longer overlapping. So all we need to do if we want to compute for loss relief is simply to bring last year's losses and first of all relieve it, that is deduct it from the profit made. Don't forget it's on preceding year basis. So now it's only utilized, unlike before that we need to take a fraction of it because of the rule. Those have been jettisoned. So just take the whole amount of the loss and utilize it, especially if the profit can absorb it. But don't forget, one of the things that we learn is that we cannot gain from our losses. So the loss relief cannot exceed the initial figure of our loss on that particular trade or business, as the case may be. So we'd love that you subscribe, and we had loved to hear from you. GJAMES Associate channel, subscribe and comment. Is there any area of loss relief that you would like to know more? Is there anything that you want us to bring clarity to in what we've learned in any of our topics under taxation or CSME, AAA, and any other courses that we've discussed on this platform? Shout us emails under the description. You can email us, you can share to every other platform and tell others to tell others, so that we can join force together and do it together to make it sweeter, like my former lecturer used to tell us then when we were students. From GJAMES Associate channel, Gbenga Olatunji has been speaking. We are value to life. We are value to your business. Don't forget to join us for another interesting topic.